Terry Fator is celebrating the holidays on stage at the Mirage, starring in A Very Terry Christmas.
Wait, stop the music. What? What's wrong, Elton? Let's do this right. Where's my $1 million piano?
Terry Fator's incredible success hides a shocking truth. Behind the America's Got Talent fame, he was battling a heartbreak that nearly destroyed him. The puppets, the glitz, the $100 million Vegas deal, they all masked a life spiraling out of control. Failed marriages, crushing loneliness, and the struggle to stay relevant nearly brought him to his knees. But there's more to this story. Tune in as we reveal the dark, untold moments that will leave you speechless. Puppets, fame, and fallout. Terry Fator has puppets that can impersonate Garth Brooks, and he raked in a $100 million deal. But behind the puppet strings, things get pretty interesting. But here's the twist. While the crowds cheered and the spotlight shone bright, a shadow loomed behind the scenes. His journey to the top wasn't just marked by hard work and talent. It was littered with secrets, sacrifices, and more than a few scandalous headlines. What really happened behind those Vegas curtains? Well, stick around because the truth is far more captivating than any act on stage. He started in Dallas, Texas in 1965. Just an ordinary kid until he found a ventriloquism book in 5th grade. Ventriloquism for Fun and Profit. Hooked, he got a Sears dummy named Willie Talk, and they were inseparable. By his teens, he was winning $125 prizes at church picnics. Yup, church picnics. About as glamorous as it got for young Terry. He tried Liberty University, but school wasn't his thing. Ventriloquism was. His mom even saved for 3 years to buy him a professional puppet, hoping it might be his ticket out of obscurity. In 1987, he joined a band called Freedom Jam, which sounds as cheesy as you'd expect. He was the lead singer touring high schools across North America. Apparently nothing says young and hip like a ventriloquist turned frontman. It was a grueling schedule, 3 performances a day, and he was there, puppet in hand, trying to make ventriloquism happen. Spoiler, it wasn't really happening yet. He then moved on to another band, creatively named Texas the Band, and he brought along his puppet, Walter T. Airedale. The band had big dreams, major record deals and all that, until a record label guy told him to drop the impersonations and sing in his own voice. Imagine being told to stop the one thing that makes you, well, you. That's when Terry decided ventriloquism and impersonations were where he really belonged. He ditched the band and set off on his own. And boy, were those solo years rough. He was performing at fairs in the blazing sun, literally getting heat stroke while trying to entertain crowds who probably couldn't care less. At one show in a 1,000-seat theater, only one person showed up. Just one. Talk about a confidence killer. It was bad enough that he seriously considered throwing in the towel. But his family pushed him to keep going, and he revamped his act, mixing in comedy, impersonations, and of course, puppets. By 2005, things started looking up. He threw some impersonations into his act while singing Friends in Low Places, and suddenly people were paying attention. He went from fairgrounds to corporate gigs for General Motors and AT&T. Not exactly the Hollywood Bowl, but it was progress. He even opened for big names like Reba McEntire and Garth Brooks. Pretty impressive for a guy who was bombing at fairs not too long before. Then came 2007, the year everything changed. He auditioned for America's Got Talent, figuring he might make it a few rounds and land a late-night gig. Instead, he won the whole darn thing. The judges, Piers Morgan, Sharon Osbourne, and David Hasselhoff, loved him. Even Simon Cowell, who's basically allergic to compliments, called Terry one of the top 2 entertainers on the planet. Not bad for a guy with a talking turtle. Winning AGT was huge, but fame came with its own set of issues. Suddenly, his schedule was packed, and he even had to turn down The Late Show with David Letterman 14 times. Imagine that, going from nobody showing up to your shows to being too busy for Letterman. Life's funny like that. Vegas was calling, and Terry landed a $100 million deal with the Mirage, one of the biggest in Vegas history. He replaced Danny Gans, and they even renamed the theater after him. It seemed like he had finally made it, but behind the scenes, things were falling apart. His first marriage was to Melinda, whom he'd eloped with back in 1991. They didn't have kids, and as his career took off, the cracks in their relationship started to show. In 2010, Melinda filed for divorce. They put on a united front for a while, even walking red carpets together after their separation. But 2 years later, Terry spilled the beans. He claimed Melinda was controlling and manipulative, that she isolated him from his family and didn't want kids. He said he stayed in the marriage because his Christian upbringing frowned upon divorce, but his newfound fame gave him the courage to walk away. Melinda, of course, had a different version. She said she only edited his book for grammar and spelling, and she denied any arguments about having kids. She claims she didn't even know Terry was unhappy until he asked for a separation. It was a classic case of he said, she said, and the truth, well, probably somewhere in the messy middle. After Melinda, he married Taylor Makakoa, a young onstage assistant he met during his show. They got married in 2010 but split up in 2015. Interestingly, they kept working together even after the divorce. Talk about awkwardness. Not long after, he met Angie Fiore, a chef from Dallas, at a charity event. He proposed on stage during a show, and they got married in 2015. Third time's the charm, right? His career kept booming. He performed at charity events, did guest appearances on AGT, and even published an autobiography called Who's the Dummy Now? He was doing everything from supporting Ronald McDonald House charities to appearing on the Jerry Lewis MDA telethon. The guy's got a big heart, no doubt about it, but he was also juggling a lot and not always successfully. The highs and lows of Terry Fator's life beyond the stage. Then there was the drama with his handlers. After winning AGT, Terry claimed they pressured him to include more risque jokes and political humor to keep things edgy. He said he was too much of a pushover to stand up for himself, which led to some content he wasn't proud of. He eventually parted ways with his manager and settled a legal dispute, but it's clear that fame wasn't all it was cracked up to be. By 2020, after 11 years, his residency at the Mirage came to an end. It was the end of an era, but not the end of Terry. He was still out there, still performing, still making people laugh, even if his personal life was a bit of a roller coaster. After his Mirage residency ended, he found new opportunities. He kept touring, performing for crowds who still loved the unique mix of ventriloquism, comedy, and music that had made him a star. He booked shows across the country, bringing Winston the impersonating turtle and the rest of his puppet crew to fans who had followed his journey since America's Got Talent. Even after all the ups and downs, he still knew how to captivate an audience. Life off stage stayed complicated, but his third marriage to Angie, a chef from Dallas, finally brought him stability. Unlike his previous partners, Angie wasn't in showbiz, maybe just the balance he needed. Together, they worked on charity initiatives, with Angie even leading the Terry Fator Foundation to support veterans and first responders, all while juggling her own career. It wasn't always easy, but they genuinely cared for each other and made it work. The Terry Fator Foundation became one of his major focuses outside of performing. He had always been passionate about giving back, and now he had a platform to make a difference. The foundation hosted events and donated proceeds to causes that he held close to his heart. Veterans, children in need, and various other charitable initiatives benefited from his success. This was a side of him that many people didn't get to see. Behind the comedy and the puppets was someone who genuinely wanted to help others. However, the challenges of fame were always lurking in the background. Despite his best efforts to stay grounded, he found himself dealing with the pressures that came with his level of success. There were always expectations from Buzz, from his team, and from himself. The demands of being a headliner in Vegas for over a decade had taken their toll, and even though he loved performing, there were times when it all felt like too much. He was no stranger to controversy either. During his time at the Mirage, he had faced criticism for some of the jokes and content in his act. He was accused of pushing boundaries in ways that some found offensive, and there were whispers that his humor had become outdated. It wasn't easy navigating the changing landscape of comedy, especially as someone who built their career on ventriloquism, a niche art form that many people didn't take seriously to begin with. Terry often felt like he was fighting an uphill battle to prove that ventriloquism could be more than just a gimmick. One of the toughest aspects of his career was the constant scrutiny. No matter what he did, it seemed like someone always had something to say, whether it was about his personal life, his performances, or his choice of material. It wore on him, and there were times when he questioned if it was all worth it. But each time he stepped on stage and heard the laughter and applause, he knew he couldn't walk away. Performing was in his blood, and despite everything, he loved it. He also had a complicated relationship with his past marriages. The end of his marriage to Melinda had been messy, with accusations flying back and forth. Melinda claimed she had no idea he was unhappy, while he painted a picture of a controlling partner who stifled his independence. The truth, as always, was likely somewhere in between. Then there was Taylor, his second wife, who had been part of his show. Their relationship had started as a whirlwind romance, but it fizzled out just as quickly. They remained friends, but there was always an element of awkwardness, especially since they continued to work together after the divorce. His marriage to Angie seemed different. For once, Terry wasn't marrying someone directly involved in his career. Angie had her own life, her own passions, and she wasn't dependent on his fame. They complemented each other, and their relationship seemed to thrive on mutual respect and support. Angie wasn't just his wife, she was also his partner in philanthropy, helping him make a difference in the lives of others. They worked together to support causes that mattered to them, and it gave him a sense of purpose beyond the stage. But even with Angie by his side, his life was far from perfect. Fame had brought him wealth and recognition, but it had also brought loneliness, stress, and a constant sense of being under a microscope. There were times when he missed the simplicity of his early years, back when he was just a kid with a puppet performing at church picnics. Back then, it was all about making people laugh, without the pressures of fame or the complications of celebrity. The art of staying true. Lately, Terry Fator's been putting the brakes on the endless hustle, opting instead for a slower, more selective pace. Finally giving himself a break. It's almost like he's realized that burning himself out with show after show isn't exactly the ticket to lasting happiness. These days, he's doing fewer gigs, and only the ones that actually feel worthwhile. It's a quality over quantity thing now. And really, can you blame him? After years of sweating under the stage lights, dealing with overbearing managers, and riding the emotional roller coaster of fame, Terry deserves a little bit of peace and quiet. He's also spending more time with his wife, Angie, who's brought a breath of fresh air and some much-needed balance to his life. Maybe, just maybe, this time he's actually found a real partner, not someone who's just along for the fame-fueled ride. But let's not pretend he's turned his back on the spotlight entirely. He's still got his hands in a few feel-good projects, like his charity work. It's nice to see someone giving back, right? Though let's be real, charity is also a great way to stay in the public eye without having to endure grueling tours. It's heartwarming and convenient for his image, a double win. Then there's the mentoring thing. He's taken on the role of a guru for young ventriloquists, sharing the secrets of the craft, almost as if he's on a mission to rescue ventriloquism from disappearing entirely. Honestly, it's like he's the guardian of a slowly fading art form, one that might otherwise slip into complete obscurity without his stubborn dedication. I mean, how many people do you know who are dreaming of a career throwing their voice into a puppet? Yeah, exactly. But Terry, he's got a kind of relentless determination to make sure ventriloquism doesn't just vanish from the cultural radar. And hey, it's not like he's totally stuck in the past either. He's been trying a bit of everything lately. The old days of simply standing on stage with a puppet are behind him. Now he's branching out, dabbling in television, doing voice work for animated shows, and even dipping his toes into digital content. That's right, he's joined the ranks of pretty much everyone else out there trying to make it online. Because let's face it, those classic Vegas stage gigs alone just aren't cutting it anymore. Times have changed, and he knows it. He's not the shiny new act he was when he first blew up on America's Got Talent, and he's savvy enough to recognize that staying relevant means adapting. So he's all in, diving headfirst into social media, animation, and online content, hoping that these new avenues will let him hang on to that fleeting glimmer of fame just a little bit longer. It's a hustle, no doubt, but you've got to respect the guy. He's not going down without a fight. He may not be the headliner at the Mirage anymore, but he's not fading into obscurity either. He's still chasing the spotlight, keeping ventriloquism alive for a niche audience in a world that's moved on to flashier acts. Whether it's a passion project or just a way to stay relevant, he's proving he's not just a ventriloquist of the past. Reinventing himself with new tricks, he's traded the intense Vegas grind for something more manageable, keeping his art form alive, even if the world isn't exactly asking for it. If he's happy, good for him. And if people still watch, even better. Looking back at Terry Fator's journey, it's been anything but a straight shot to fame and contentment. This is a guy who started as just another kid in Dallas who found a book on ventriloquism and got hooked. Then there were those brutal years of struggle, performing for tiny crowds in dingy venues, often for little to no money. It was perseverance that led him to America's Got Talent, where his victory finally launched him into the kind of stardom he had dreamed about for decades. He went from being a nobody to a Vegas headliner almost overnight. And for a while, he lived the dream. Big contracts, sold-out shows, and that coveted residency on the Strip. Even after his residency at the Mirage ended, he didn't throw in the towel. There's something to be said for a guy who keeps showing up, no matter how many times the industry tries to tell him he's past his prime. He's still out there performing, still bringing his puppets to life, and still getting a laugh or two, even if it's a little more subdued than the roar of a packed Vegas theater. His journey is proof that success isn't always this neat fairy tale line where everything just works out. It's messy, complicated, and full of unexpected turns. There have been highs and plenty of lows, moments of sheer triumph, and periods where it must have felt like it was all slipping away. But for Terry, the love of performing has always been at the heart of it all. He's had to adapt, whether that's by leaning into social media, taking on voice work, or mentoring up-and-coming performers. It's not exactly the glittering Vegas dream of his heyday, but it's something. It's enough to keep him going. And that's more than a lot of entertainers can say. Behind the puppets, in the smile that's almost too good to be true, there's a guy who's been through the ringer and who's still here, puppet on his knee, cracking jokes, and giving it whatever he's got left. Maybe he's not the headline act anymore. Maybe ventriloquism is as niche and outdated as it's ever been. But Terry Fator's still got something that not many can claim, a passion for his craft that hasn't faded even after all these years. He's not giving up, and he's not backing down. If anything, he's more determined than ever to prove that there's still room for a guy with a puppet and a dream, even in a world that seems to have moved on. And you know what? Maybe there is. As Terry's story shows, fame isn't always as glamorous as it seems. But here's a question. Would he have found happiness without the fame? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives like this one.